Good morning, and thank you so much for joining me on this panel. I think it's a very interesting panel because, from starting to talk about cloud, and then there were multiple clouds, then there was hybrid cloud, private cloud. We've had a terrific journey, but I think it's important now to really talk about this aspect where organizations have actually started to use, multiple clouds. And as I was talking in my session in the morning, that large enterprises are actually largely using private cloud, followed by hybrid, and we're seeing digital natives and startups and SMBs, tending to use public cloud more. Although public cloud is used everywhere, but still we see more of that in the smaller companies. So it's important to have a discussion around this because when we look at the usage of the cloud, there are many factors that actually come in. When we talk about what to really put where in terms of workload, in terms of security, in terms of bandwidth, there are so many different aspects to really talk about. So to start with you, Dr. Devra, the topic is about flexibility, agility, and economy when we talk about adoption of cloud. So if you really want to be flexible and agile within the budget, do you really look at multi-cloud as an option and as the only option as a way forward? Should you really look at that? Is it now really the new reality as we are really seeing? As a practitioner, as somebody who's actually looking at IT, what are your views around multi-cloud?
Thanks, Anil. So, interesting questions that you see multi-cloud versus a single player. So I think actually when we start our journey with the cloud, the basic problem you see comes into the mind of promoter or the stakeholder is the security of the data. So I think you see most of the cloud players actually try to convince on the security part. So I think if you flip the question, you think that you see everything is unsecure on the cloud and your data may go into the wrong hand, then how do you handle it? So I think to handle it, one aspect is that you see you obfuscate your complete data, you do complete obfuscation, or you do encryption, okay, and then you put that data into one cloud and taking the data the same copy on the another cloud as your business continuity plan. So there is no choice. There is the cloud is the only choice. It's become an essence to operate for the IT teams. We have to go into the cloud. The only thing is that we have to find the solutions from the IT perspective, rather than the vendor is giving the idea that it's secure. Now, I think this way, we can go into the multi-cloud and obfuscate, and basically you can put your data into 2 or 3 places, and then if something goes wrong, and you can get back those data. So what I think, this is the best solution.
Okay. No, you bring an interesting perspective, especially when you talk about moving to the cloud and you look at security aspect. And that is obviously a concern for everyone, according to various studies also. And yes, it is a concern. You put up the data in the cloud, how do you really look at security? One small loophole and the entire data can actually get compromised. But then, yeah, one solution to that could be, if you're using cloud, repatriate some of that. And we're actually seeing some of that trend also happening in the industry, where companies are actually looking at, enterprises are looking at, repatriating workloads from public cloud into a private cloud. So that is a question to you, Kamal, in terms of looking at some of the repatriation triggers. Dr. Devra said that one solution is to look at multi-cloud and all that. But what are some of the triggers for repatriation also? Would security be one of them, or having your confidential data, because of that you want to repatriate and all that? What are some of the views? What are some of the repatriation triggers?
Great. Thanks for bringing me in. And I think the topic actually defines the answer to your question, because it's about flexibility, agility, and economy. And additionally, the point that Dr. Devra said about security, right? And these are the reasons against which any CIO or organization evaluates multiple options that are presented today, whether it's private cloud, public cloud, and so on and so forth, because obviously they want to be agile, they want to have availability of data to all the stakeholders as and when required. So any app, you might have the most wonderful app, it really does not serve any purpose, it does not serve your customers or partners or internal employees unless it has access to data all the time. You might have the best data innovators, you might have the best analysts, but they obviously also need access to the data at the right point in time. But all of it needs to happen at the right cost because you cannot assign the same dollar value to every gigabyte which is part of your organization, right? Different data streams will have different economic value and stuff like that. And then the question of security, which irrespective of whether you're talking about data on the edge, on the core, on the cloud, or on a hybrid cloud, is a factor that you need to account for. And when you look at people making those decisions, whether to kind of keep it something which is already running on a public cloud, to keep it there or to bring it back, or vice versa, these are the factors that define, right? And we're seeing a lot of organizations looking at the changing regulatory landscape, for example. So regulatory landscape is a big criteria when you're looking both from a security perspective as well as compliance perspective on whether you can keep it on the public cloud, is the public cloud or the hosting is in the sovereign national boundaries, or what is the criteria around that. Then there is cost, obviously, right? So sometimes the organizations find themselves paying not just for utilizing the data that you're putting, but also if they want to repatriate it back. So you have egress costs and ingress costs and stuff like that. And when you apply all this, and especially when you look at the regulatory environment, the security and all that stuff, a lot of application, it just makes sense to have a whole lot of stuff on-prem. Now, how to do it while ensuring agility as well as flexibility and economy is the question that we're trying to answer as infrastructure organizations, is to give the ability to have the economic experience of cloud, which is the flexibility in terms of how you pay, how you consume and stuff like that, as well as the operational ease, right? Because that was one big reason for a lot of organizations to look at cloud, which was the operational ease that it provided. So you could do 2 clicks. You could kind of like abstract the infrastructure from the usage, right? So a normal user, and that's when you look at things like unified data ops from HP and all, with bringing the operational ease to the on-prem environment. And hence that is, in a nutshell.
So we are seeing that by repatriating, you can still get that level of ease, flexibility, agility by even moving on-prem, which is basically probably the main lure for moving to the public cloud.
Right. The reality would be that any organization, and you rightly mentioned it in your opening remarks, that will have apps which are going to be on-prem completely, which are going to be on hybrid, and which are going to be on cloud, because just that's the way the reality is going to be. Right. They're going to be on edge, they're going to be on core and stuff like that. So ability to actually have a data view across this, ability to have the right dollar per GB in terms of economy, as well as availability to the right stakeholders at the right point of time is what is going to define.
So coming to, when we look at cloud native, Sarbani, we hear a lot of, things about now having cloud native, having your applications that are cloud ready. Are we moving now from being, cloud native to really multi-cloud native? I mean, if you want to stay competitive in the global market, is that now really the new mantra?
Thanks for the question. So, am I audible? Yeah. So today, as this is 75%, I was just reading an EY and NASSCOM survey. 75% organizations are already on the cloud, and it is predicted by 2024, 90% organizations would have adopted the cloud. There's no denying the popularity of the cloud trend, and it's a no-brainer, the benefits that it gives, right? And organizations are on different stages of their cloud journey. While some are reaping the benefits of cloud completely, some are cloud native, which were born in the cloud era, while some like us are traditional companies, which did not find it very easy to start their cloud journey just for the heck of it. There were so many things to be, weighed. The trend of hybrid cloud in Indian organizations, I think, is most suited for various reasons. Now, while cost efficiencies, flexibility, scalability, all of these, low time to market, all of these are the obvious benefits for the startups, for the new age companies, for the SME. The other, larger organizations which have been there for a large time, which have invested heavily in their data centers already, they cannot dump it all. They have a lot of legacy applications running, or maybe applications running smoothly, so they need to think twice. They need to do a cost benefit, risk benefit analysis before moving onto the cloud. So they would maybe prefer to stay on with their data center or have their own private cloud, which will help them reap the benefits of having more control on their data, so to speak, or they may belong to a vertical in the industry which requires, for compliance and regulatory purposes, to have data on-prem. So it makes more sense. It also depends on the CFO, the budget, and the business goals of the organizations. So it makes complete sense to have a hybrid mix of cloud architecture, where you have private, public, where it tips more towards the private or more towards the public, depends entirely on the nature of the business, on the reasons for adopting cloud. While all these commoditized consumable services take off a lot from the CIO's plate, your basic solutions are all provided for, and you can focus more on the strategic goals. So it makes complete sense to take these basic solutions off the cloud. But there are certain mission critical applications which you may need to want to have more control over. Also, you need to think whether you have the manpower, because cloud provisioning and cloud architecture can be really complex for large organizations with varied applications. So and that can be disastrous if not planned properly. So that also needs to be taken into consideration. So yes, a mix of public-private cloud is definitely the trend today, and organizations are preferring more and more of that hybrid kind of architecture, rather than just jumping onto the public cloud bandwagon.
So basically, yeah, so what you say is that yes, we are now moving into a multi-native cloud, and not necessarily just single cloud, but
Single cloud, but
yeah,
a
multi-cloud native is what we are really actually tending to. Good. I think, but as you rightly said that, about the survey, that 90% of organizations are going to be using the cloud. Majority of them are going to be SMEs. I mean, SMEs do have resort to the public cloud. And Samir, you have actually been working with SMEs for a long time, and you kind of understand them inside out in terms of what sort of challenges they face. What do you think are some of the challenges today for SMEs for adopting multi-cloud?
Yeah, thanks, Anil. So, see, the challenges at the MSME level are quite similar to what are, for example, large enterprise like doctors. But I think one of the biggest challenges, of course, manpower, quality of manpower, lack of knowledge, that's all there. One of the biggest issues that we have faced in trying to convince customers to shift to any kind of cloud, forget hybrid or multi or private or public, is lack of awareness also, and the fact that the industry where I come from, I've been in the industry for more than 3 decades now, we have tried to kind of complicate and make it more technical, rather than demystifying the technology around cloud. So all these terms, the virtualization, the VMwares, is kind of putting the fear of God and fear of technology into the mind of the SME owners, and that's why. And of course, the quality of manpower at SME is also, is also not too great in terms of understanding cloud. So the biggest challenge is the lack of understanding and knowledge at the ownership level. Of course, the absence of the right vendors, right? So a company like HP would be, of course, present all over the country, but the lack of knowledge of the concerned vendor, who is the supplier to that the customer, is also a known challenge, which becomes which really adds to the myth of topics like cost, topics like lack of manpower, कि वो data चला जाएगा sir, and then we will not have control. So to counter sir's question about security, we normally tell the SME owners that the data is much more secure in the cloud because it's been managed by somebody who has no interest in your business, right? Amazon or Microsoft or HP Cloud or IBM Cloud is their people are not so much interested in taking out your data as your own employees, as your own ex-employees, as people, somebody that you might have given a warning in the morning. He's the likely the most person likely that he's the one who's do something wrong with your data, and it's a known fact that most of the leakages happen from in-house only. So answering your question, I think that's the biggest challenge that we face from the SME owners.
That's interesting to know, considering that on one side we're saying that 90% organizations are going to be adopting multi-cloud, and the other we're saying that awareness is still a major challenge amongst the SME segment.
So Anil, let me tell you, so we survive only on MSME advisory, and not even 25% customers are on cloud. Not even 25. And I'm talking of companies with 1,000 crore plus turnovers. None of our customers are below 1,000 crore turnover. But not even 25% are on cloud. They all want to go to cloud, but it's on HPs and the other person to give them the comfort that nor are we going to run away, nor is the vendor going to run away. We are there.
Wow, that's interesting. Very, very interesting to know that. There are SMEs in the country and even large companies also where awareness is a major challenge. Yeah, please.
I just wanted to add here, which sir has rightly talked about. You see, it is our fear that somebody will steal my data, and we still feel as a Indian household people earlier used to think that my gold is safe at my home. But it's not, but it's more safe in the bank's locker. So the same way, it is interesting that I feel that, in my server room, my data is more safe, but I think it is more vulnerable than the cloud. So that's the one part. So it depends upon the industry to industry, in which industry we are, okay. So if we are in normal manufacturing industry where the data is not basically IP driven kind of thing, so I think yes, cloud is a straight fit for them. But suppose you are in research and innovation like ours, we are in the specialty chemical business or fluorine chemistry, and means a lot of scientists and design engineers works with us. So everything bread and butter is for us is the technology, correct? So coming to that part of area, like if you talk about chemistries or pharmaceuticals, where the people do a lot of innovations, and we are really scared about our IP data, where my chemistry lies, where my design lies. If you get to know about our recipes, okay, and if somebody knows about the design, they can create the plants, okay, within no time. So here there is a challenge. And second challenge, I can tell you that if your scientists or design engineers are in any company are interacting, then we should be very, very careful that there was some basically some rumors was going on about X platform or Y platform, that they keep on recording and the servers are at X particular country, and they may provide your recording to their scientists to crack that molecule, and before you launch to the world, they will be able to launch based on your research and innovation which you have put 2-3 years. So this is one of the areas that sir I was talking about.
Kamal, I think this question definitely comes to you, because absolutely this concern is very much there amongst large enterprises that IPR, if the data is moving across multiple countries, then obviously there are going to be apprehensions about, irrespective of how secure a cloud is, there's going to be apprehensions about that, which is where obviously moving, such complex workloads to the cloud becomes a major challenge. So as a tech vendor, what is really your advice, to them?
Okay, so I think very, very pertinent points coming up, and just kind of shows the spectrum across which technology is operating, right from SMEs to specialty, large enterprises who have a lot of IP which needs to be protected for the business to be successful, right? So hence, what we're saying is that it is not a one-size-fit-all environment. A public cloud, whatever it might be, might not even in a SME or in a large organization cover the entire spectrum of the requirement. Even within a large organization might cover only a limited spectrum of requirement, and hence the reality would remain hybrid. There would be stuff which would definitely make sense: flexibility, economy, SLA, performance, cost, to be kept on-prem, but in a cloud-enabled platform. And there would be stuff which would just make sense because it's so routine, so mundane that it can be comfortably kept on a public cloud. But once again, you will need to have a security layer or a policy layer which runs across all this. So the end of the day, and I think that's what the gentleman and ma'am were talking about, the architecture, what you design, is going to be giving you the comfort that my data is safe, irrespective of whether it's on-prem or on a hybrid cloud or a private cloud. And hence what we're saying is that you look at your data spectrum and define the policies that you would want to apply. Have the ability to deploy these policies at the cost framework that you would want to adopt. So net, what our proposition is to give the ability to get this whole cloud operational experience to your on-prem infrastructure, so that you're able to separate the underlying infrastructure from the user. The user can simply define, for example, I'll just take one example of, let's say, I want to provision storage, right? So the user doesn't need to be a storage administrator. You don't need to have those kind of expensive resources all the time available, or have them look at something else. And the user just says, I need this much capacity, this much performance, and this SLA, and I need this level of protection. And that's how the stuff gets designed. So whether you're keeping your data on cloud or you're keeping it on-prem, you need to have a strategy around how you're going to run your BCP, how are you going to protect yourself against ransomware, to exactly his point about IP, how I'm going to protect against internal or external threats which can impact my data availability or my data security, right? And once you have this architecture in place, and now from HPE, they're very, very simplistic solutions from a usage perspective. They're complex technologies, but for an administrator user, they're simple GUI managed stuff where you can do a BCPDR between an on-prem and a cloud and another cloud, and between various forms of clouds and stuff like that. And all of this is available as a service. So you really don't need to kind of keep a large amount of CapEx investment, even if you are a 1,000 crore enterprise or you are multi-thousand crore enterprise, and have the both economy as well as the operational experience from that simplified perspective. And have the comfort of having it on-prem, so you're not worried about regulatory and other parameters that define how you're going to store your data, how you're going to comply to various legal and other requirements that come from the government.
So essentially, it's giving the same cloud-like experience on-prem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of these, I'd like to add, having a good partner, a knowledgeable thought leader partner is key, who can guide you to the best optimum mix for your organization, what to have. So
Yeah, but from a user perspective,
Yeah.
Sarbani, what would be, your advice, or how do you really strike the right balance? Because we are having this constant discussion about, everyone's talking about having something on-prem and then there's something on the cloud. How do you really strike the balance of what should go where? Because now there are multiple workloads and there are multiple cloud options available. So the next big question and the challenge is, what do I put
the
where?
most pertinent question, I would say,
Yeah.
is to find that optimum mix and strike the right balance, because cloud mature enterprises are those which move to the cloud at the right time for the right reasons and the right workloads. It depends entirely on your workload. Now, I come from a media organization which of course, Dainik Jagran is the flagship product, which is a print publication. But we do, in this digital age, cannot ignore the digital side of it. And pandemic, of course, gave a boost to digitization. So we have these digital verticals which cater to the mobile apps or the websites, Jagran.com or your Dainik Jagran app, the e-newspaper, etc. Now these need to churn out content uh, quickly, and they need to churn out very fast. They need to roll out apps quickly. So speed to market is of key there. And of course, consumer preferences is the key to monetization. How well you serve your consumers, how well you know their preferences. So consumer segmentation, consumer, analytics of their preferences, etc. So you serve the right content to your right target consumer. So all of these consumer-oriented things, it makes total sense. It's a no-brainer that you move on to a cloud platform where you can make use. And there are so many. When we began our journey, there were no cloud solutions cut out for industry verticals, for say the media. So very gingerly we would begin with the DR solution or something, when we began our cloud journey. But now there are customized solutions available for the media. So from production to distribution, with good CDNs inbuilt, there is no latency loss, and you can really serve your end consumers. So that consumer-oriented, applications can of course go to the cloud. The employee collaboration, the productivity management, these are very routine things where it's there, and you have plenty of choices. So it's a no-brainer that you take a cloud solution and you set going. The pandemic again was an example where we needed to collaborate, where we needed to monitor productivity of the employees working remotely, and that was the need of the hour. And cloud solutions, what better than using one of these services available readily on the cloud. Whereas for the business management, for the more the ERP side, if it is running smoothly, and you have good, you have a good data center where it is available, where it is already running tailor-made to your organization, you're getting a good performance. If you have engineered systems like we do, we prefer to keep it on-prem. Whereas where data is required as a dashboard, across the various, finally your senior management would need. There again, cloud solutions would work very well because you would have transparency and access to the data dashboards where you need to monitor your entire enterprise, what better option than the cloud. So you need to see actually the reason why you need to move, the kind of how does it add value to your, does it help, is it aligned to your business goals, does it help to build in some operational efficiency, does it actually bring in cost efficiencies? Because if you see large applications which involve, like ours has a footprint, our organization has a footprint right across the length and breadth of the organization, and there are numerous transactions. Does it even make sense to move into the cloud? Because if you need that kind of efficiency, your cost per unit will also scale up. So in the long run, this major benefit, which is always given as a, a cost saving, might actually end up, throwing a surprise at you if you've not provisioned carefully. So you really need to weigh all of this, because this has long term. Implementing the cloud is the easiest thing to do, but migrating needs proper planning, because it will have a long term and company wide impact. So it really needs a lot of planning there. So you need really to weigh the cost and benefits and see the kind of nature of the workload, the nature of the target audience, and of course the budgets is an important consideration here, apart from things like IP, things like your regulations, which require where the data needs to be. And of course the key thing here is to find a good partner, I keep repeating, because who can hold your hand, give you that vision, give you the roadmap ahead, and so you can to execute this journey successfully. And you should be very careful that you don't end up getting locked in with a solution which doesn't work for you, and then you, instead of being flexible, you actually lose your agility and you're stuck there. So that's one, I've seen many of my peers suffering and complaining about that too. So that's one aspect which also needs to be thought about.
No, I think you raised some very, very valid points, and that can go into a lot of other points and of debate and all that. So very interesting. Yeah, cost benefit analysis is there, and having chosen the right partner is there, and all that. Sameer, what would you advise in terms of choosing the right cloud partner for some of your clients that you work with, considering that even awareness is not there, as you rightly said, what would be some of the advice?
So Anil, one thing that we try to do with SME owners is not try to sell cloud as a cost saving measure. So I don't think cloud saves cost for SMEs, especially in the first few years. Actually increases your cost, right? So that's, I think, a myth. Like I said, demystify technology. Cloud doesn't actually save your cost. So the reason we been trying to convince our customers is that, like, you outsource your tea making to a vendor outside, somebody else makes tea for you. So cloud management of your IT is not your core area. So most of our customers are manufacturing customers, and they are in tier 2 or tier 3 cities. That's why I said the adoption is below 25%. And for them, obviously, managing IT is not their core area, nor it will be, never be. A ma'am, of course, comes from an industry which has adopted IT some 20 years back. आप लोगों ने start ही IT से करा था. You were never without a IT company. But other, I'm talking of manufacturing, I'm talking of steel, I'm talking of rolling mills, where IT is still considered a function to be handled by the IT team. Doesn't bother me. I'm manufacturing head, so I will not bother about IT. So there, these kind of issues come. So like I said, cost, in terms of cost, we don't talk of cost. We said that this is something that you don't have expertise, and you will not get expertise in the 10 year. No good CIO will come and work for you in this small town. And of course, anyway, you can't anyway afford to hire them. So you better outsource it to a cloud vendor, and that's the first step that we start using with them. So in terms of cost, we don't talk about this. Other thing is that we were discussing. We didn't discuss that, but I think that's part of the topic, is the difference between multi-cloud and the hybrid cloud. So a lot of people kind of confuse the two, especially in the SME market, where for them it's everything is either cloud or multiple cloud means the same as hybrid cloud. So, like you mentioned, that a lot of their applications are still native applications which are not cloud ready. And for them, hybrid is something that is, I think, not a choice. They have to go hybrid from day one. I mean, coming back to the point, the market size in tier 2, tier 3 cities, it's hungry. They are hungry for the right people to come and tell them the right solution, give them that hand-holding, give them that trust, that confidence that we are there, and this is not your core area. Please have confidence in us. And I'm sure all this is music to your ears, which you already know. So this.
One thing I would like to add here, the cost of transportation. You see, so interestingly, we did some POC for implementing a COVID protocol. Okay, so on the cloud, the solution was, you see, commercially viable. That was okay. But what happened when we actually, the person said that you just do nothing. This is my cost proposition, but you take care of the data transfer. So when we connected with the transporter, means any lease line, and interestingly, we found that the cost of transportation was coming much higher than the original solution. So this is the one of the key area we have to take account for it. The cloud provider should also talk about the cost of transportation,
Especially in tier 2 and tier 3 cities.
I think this is true for tier 1 also, because if you want to stream your if you want to stream the video, okay, and you want to ensure that the two people should not come the cross proximity, okay, so then you will be streaming your, suppose, plant camera, 200 camera you are streaming, and how much they are said that we need 2 Mbps for each camera, okay, SD camera. Then we will actually give the alert that if 2 person is breaking the COVID protocol, there will be alert to HR or something like that, okay. So the solution was much more cheaper on the cloud, okay, if the data provided, if you get the data, correct, and the cost of transportation was very, very high.
Yeah, one thing I would like to add, Anil, here is that with the upcoming personal data protection bill, which should be presented either in the July session, monsoon session, or the next session, once this bill becomes an act, the privacy of the personal data, now of course it includes non-personal data also, which is like opening up a can of worms. But even if you were to look at only personal data and ensuring privacy of the personal data, without cloud, this is going to be impossible for smaller, anywhere. I mean, smaller company, large companies, and of course, I'm sure all of you know that this is going to be mandatory for all of us to adhere to that law, which means that all personal data within the organization, whether employee personal data or if you're carrying customer personal data, like if you're an e-commerce company or whatever, there are laws are going to be very, very stringent, and penalties are one of the highest in the world, including criminal penalties for the management. So those kind of solutions for SMEs to implement without cloud is going to be it's going to be impossible.
So, slight amount of disagreement, but first I wanted to respond to his point that your case was a very classical example of edge analytics, right? So, if you actually do not, even in case of an on-prem solution, if you're trying to bring all the data back to your data center and doing that analytics, then it's going to be expensive. The best case is to do an edge analytics there and just transport back the exceptions. If people are maintaining distance or any video surveillance environment, you really don't need to transport back unless it's regulatorily required everything. You just need to transport back the exceptions and have a record of those. If you're maintaining distance, you really don't need to, capture that and all. And that's a beautiful way of doing it. And hence, what I was coming to is that for everything there are, and when I say on-prem, I include colo environments and stuff like that, which kind of takes away that. It's just not a non-public cloud kind of environment where you can pick up and implement all these technologies on a consumption basis, right? And especially for mid-sized growing enterprises or large enterprises across the spectrum, the whole as-a-service concept is kind of really beautiful because it gives you access to the technology that you want. It gives it to you at the economic scale that you want, and still gives you the comfort of all the regulatory requirements or the comfort of just from a policy or a owner perspective, having my data in my control kind of scenario. So our partner Orbit is there somewhere in the room. They are implementing, for example, a backup as a service. Not implementing their app, they have implemented and they're supporting backup as a service for one of the large organizations, which had the same concern because they have a very IP around the manufacturing process and the data that they would want to, the customer wanted to maintain on. Obviously, full-fledged, it costs a lot. So this backup as a service, for example, I'm just taking one. You can take backup of your data in an immutable way and hence comply to all the regulatory requirements on-prem, or extend the same to a public cloud, a secure public cloud instance for a long-term retention. So you can have the benefit of both, which is to have an on-prem copy which you can retrieve quickly and stuff like that, but have an immutable copy on a public cloud which is there for long-term retention, keep your dollar per GB low and stuff like that. And the regulation that you're talking about is very, very interesting because financial service industry is already running with that, and for a lot of stuff. So it's just not about data security, it's also about data availability for them, and they are under pressure for a lot of penal implications to the management in case there are any breaches. So the architecture they're evolving across private and public cloud is that, and it will come down to the scale where a SME could also take benefit of that as well. So cloudification, and I completely agree with you, is primarily from a ease of use perspective, where you can take away, abstract the complexity of the technology from the end user who is there to kind of take benefit of the privileges and the data and the access that technology or the solutions that technology provided, gives them the dashboard and stuff like that. The senior management is not bothered how you're putting that dashboard together. They're just interested in seeing that. And for that, I'm sure ma'am would have to work across the workload and app spectrum to actually pull all this data together and present, right? And that's, I think, what is the key, because that's what would matter to the business end of the day.
Yeah, thanks, I think, and that also brings us to the end of the panel. We have maybe about 40 seconds. We've not given the audience any chance to ask any questions, so I'm going to open the house to see if maybe one question, if the audience has, anybody has one question, maybe we can take. There's a question there. Can we please take the mic? Can somebody please give the mic there?
I'm A.K. Goswami from Bank of Maharashtra. I just wanted to know the scenario as it is presently with cloud and banks, particularly public sector banks. Can you throw some light on it?
I'm sorry, were you able to hear him? I think if you could, can we raise up the volume, please? We were not able to hear you.
I was asking whether the cloud is now getting into the banks also or something. In any scenario.
Sir, I know for sure that RBI has a mandate that all backup of bank data has to be on the cloud. So there is a mandate there as per RBI regulations, that I know for sure.
Private or public?
Private bank or public?
Private or public? The cloud.
You mean the private bank or private cloud?
Private cloud.
No, they don't define
They have not defined.
They have not defined that, but it's a mandate, and it always the next step is like I was talking about the personal data. Obviously, as a bank, you're carrying personal data, and I'll just give you an example that we conducted a DPI, a data protection impact assessment of a leading insurance broker. I'm giving you an example of insurance broker because we club you into a BFSI, the banking and insurance industry, and there were major red flags there. And coming back to your question, yes, it is mandatory for all banks to keep DR, of course, have a BCP plan, have a DR plan, and BCP plan will mean that you have to have your data in a different seismic zone, right? Obviously, for obvious reasons. Kamal again.
Any bank which started this? If you could just tell me.
All banks.
No, but
Yeah, all banks are. So if you look at a classical bank or even a manufacturing, so there is always a core, right? So core banking is the core in a bank, ERP is core in a manufacturing, and then there are a lot of other applications, right? Which are supplementary applications. Could be loan management, it could be forex, and so on and so forth, right? So core classically is on-prem, and they kind of trying to cloudify the core as well. So the big core banking solution providers, whether it's Finacle or TCS, they're kind of cloudifying their own apps, but they're going to largely remain on-prem because of the amount of latency and the data requirement that you have, right? On the other banking applications, which have slowly become as critical as the core banking, right? Because that's how you function both from a commercial banking as well as a consumer banking perspective. There is an initiative across banks, whether you look at any of the large banks, don't want to take names, to set up a private cloud infrastructure for that. And for some of it, people are kind of using pieces of public cloud for backup, or for the peripheral applications, like Ma'am was giving some examples, which are best served out of cloud. They're allowed to do that as long as it does not violate the data policy. But largely the initiative is to cloudify the internal applications, set up on a private cloud and extend it across the BCP and DR environment to both meet the RTO as well as the RPO requirements.
thank you, sir. I got it.
We'll just take one more question because we're really out of time.
First of all, good morning, everyone. And my name is Ravi, and I am from Institute of Directors. My question is to Mr. Shamir. That it's very easy and easy for them convincing to the management that one organization should opt a cloud. But after opting it, every data is getting stored on the cloud. And when the IT people wants to recover it back, or there are so many that clauses. When we want the data to be back or to migrate to some other server. So somehow we get a response from them that it's easy to migrate, but we will not delete your data. In future, if you come back and if you want your data to be back on our server, you want to reuse it, so you have to pay it. So there is a lack of transparency that is still missing, and people are getting suffered when they actually go for it.
No, I don't think retrieving your own data is an issue with any cloud vendor. I'm sure ma'am will.
But there is a cost. There is a hidden cost. Once you
Yes, like it was mentioned that the SLA that you signed and the agreement that you signed with the cloud vendor, and I didn't get the name of your organization, but I am assuming that
I am from Institute of Directors.
Institute of Directors.
Yes.
Okay. So I think it is part of the initial negotiations and the SLA that you should sign with them, and it's your data. Retrieving your data, even if it is a cost, should be part of the overall agreement that you do with the cloud vendor. Maybe ma'am can throw more light on that.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
we
so
should.
I think ma'am covered it and she talked about it. There is always a data ingress and egress cost in cloud. And you have to be careful, and that's what I think she was suggesting. That was I was talking about the transportation cost. So there are those costs in public cloud, and she was suggesting that when you look at the cost-benefit analysis, you got to account for all those things, as well as the whether you have an open. She said that whether you have an open architecture or not, which means that your ability to move from one to another without a lot of barriers to movement as well as the cost to movement.
Yeah, I think further discussions can happen online because we are really out of time and probably eating into the next session. So I'd like to thank you all for joining me for this discussion, sharing your inputs, and thanks to everyone for listening in and the interaction. Okay, sure.
Thank you, Anil. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists, for such an enlightenment session. May I request Anil Chopra to hand over the mementos to our esteemed panelists?
Sure.